Now, the DMO will be selling between 60 and 80 billion naira of bonds on the 15th of February. What can we expect from the auction compared to what we saw last month?
Well, last month's auction came late. I mean, the calendar for Q1 came out a bit late. So the auction happened on the 25th of January. Unfortunately, that day was also the same day for Treasury bill primary auction. And those two auctions happening on the same day saw significantly reduced volumes in the DMO auction. So it's safe to assume that those rates and volumes we saw last month will not repeat this time. Probably going to see slightly lower rates, around 16 for 2019 and 2022 bonds.
What type of take-up are you perhaps forecasting for this bonds?
Well, I think a lot depends on whether the DMO wants to go to the higher or lower end of their band. They said they'll do 30 to 40 for 2019 and 2022. If they decide to make up for the lost ground last month, where they only issued some 4 billion, then the take-up percentage might be slightly less. But if they restrict supply more towards the 30-35 billion range, then you'll have probably a slightly lower rate and a lower percentage take-up.
Now, if we turn our attention to interest rates in the country, the central bank left rates on hold at the last meeting at 12%. What are your views on interest rates? What's the interest rate outlook for the rest of the year?
Well, I mean, so far it's looking as if the rates are going to remain flat, slightly. Be conscious of the fact that if you take rates much higher than here, there becomes very little incentive for actual real credit growth. Right now, banks are investing at 17% T-bills, slightly below. And at those kind of rates, it gets very difficult to lend to high-quality corporates. Very few corporates will pay the rates that the federal government is paying right now. And pushing it much higher than that will push it to the point where there's a disincentive to lend.
Now, there have been a few articles this week on the federal government getting private money, private sector money to fund power infrastructure like the transmission grid. How soon can we expect to see some sort of infrastructure bond in issue in Nigeria?
Yeah, the problem with the infrastructure bond side is really more of underlying assets. So far, there's very few, maybe one or two privately owned civil infrastructure in the country, and without having those quality assets on the line, it's more or less impossible to do a bond issue. Even if you had the assets on the line, the bond issue might be more of a refinancing than a primary financing for the acquisition or construction of the assets. So judging by the current situation in the country, the most likely candidates, like I suppose I've suggested this week, is around the power sector, but that hasn't, the privatization hasn't really happened yet. So until that privatization does happen on the power side, no infrastructure bonds are likely to come out of there. On the civil infrastructure side, airports, roads, again, there are no front runners yet. The process has been slow, and even one or two cases of concessions have been threatened to be reversed. So until we have good quality underlying assets, it will be difficult to do an issue. But when those assets become available, the funding is definitely there within the pension fund community to acquire infrastructure bonds if they're adequately priced.